only 7 or 8% of the US population is metabolically fit, which means that 92 to 93% of Americans, at least, are not fit.
Today, we're joined by Mark Sisson, founder of Primal Kitchen and father of the paleo movement. He's here to share his insights on nutrition, fitness, and living optimally.
What health-defining habits of our ancestors do you think that we've lost?
The types of foods that our ancestors ate, all natural, lots of plants, some animal products, fruits, some root tubers. Pretty simple. By the way, the body doesn't really burn a lot of calories during exercise, and you can't exercise away a bad diet. Your ability to burn your stored body fat happens as a result of
1/3 of all people in the world didn't meet the recommendations of physical activity in 2022.
It's beyond scary, and I think that that's a gross underestimate of how many people didn't meet their requirements.
What patterns in life led you to realize that paleo is the way to live?
The patterns were...
Mark Sisson, the OG, the father of the paleo movement. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Tim. Great to see you again, man.
This is something I've been looking forward to for quite some time. I've been following your work for ages. And I mean, I think it's 71 now. You're looking in your 50s. I often refer to you as my role model when it comes to this. So I hope I can stay in as good a shape as you have.
Well, you're on your way, right? So you're doing all the right things.
So what patterns in life led you to realize that paleo, is the way to live and eat?
Well, the patterns were, my own failings as an athlete trying to improve performance and getting into a lifestyle that at the time was predicated, as a runner, was predicated on as many miles as you could handle in a week and a diet that was based on a very high carb intake, like 1,000 grams of carbohydrates a day. I was able to perform relatively well on that on that pattern, if we're using the term pattern, but I was falling apart on the inside. I was, on the outside, I looked pretty healthy. I was on the cover of Runner's World magazine 3 times. I finished 5th in the U.S. National Championship Marathon in 1980. Finished 4th at Ironman in 1982. But I was falling apart on the inside. I had irritable bowel syndrome. I had GERD. I had upper respiratory tract infections 6 or 8 times a year, arthritis in my feet, tendonitis in my hips. I mean, it was not the picture of health. And those were the original patterns of my own behavior that caused me to pause and go, wait. I'm trying to achieve the sort of iconic, strong, lean, fit, happy, productive, healthy body. And I'm struggling through this process, and I'm suffering, and I'm doing what I think is all the right things. I'm doing the work. What's wrong? So I took a step back after I retired from competition, and I called upon my background I have a degree in biology from Williams College. I was a pre-med student, and I was fascinated by evolutionary biology. And I thought, well, okay, there have to be some ancestral patterns. And that's literally the first time I used the term ancestral to look at what it is about humans, what it is about our genetic recipe that we all have that wants us to be strong and fit and lean and healthy and happy. And what are the patterns in our lives that cause the genes that we all have to turn on, that build muscle, that create a robust immune system, that burn fat? And what are the genes we want to turn off that cause inflammation, that lead us down a path of sickness and illness and dis-ease and dysfunction? So the early days of my investigations were all around these ancestral patterns, which initially became the 10 primal blueprint laws that, sort of launched my career path there.
And what a career path it has been as well. It's like, I think you've been so referenced in everything to do with paleo and taking this complicated life back to its basics. And I think there's so many different models of different, influencers, authors and things like that have been based off that work as well. So it's really, really built a legacy. And I think when people say about, oh, well, what did our ancestors do? It always makes me smile of where it came back to or came from. So the average person these days sits for 10+ hours a day. And yet our ancestors moved nearly 10 miles, apparently. And these days we're lucky if we get 10,000 steps. What health-defining habits of our ancestors do you think that we've lost? And how is that tied to, this dis-ease that you mentioned?
Again, the ancestral patterns, the diet, which is a fairly simple concept, eat natural things, which we have completely somehow turned on its head and eat mostly processed, high sugar content, highly refined flours, uh, industrial seed oils. Those are not what our ancestors consumed on a regular basis. So it was the types of foods that our ancestors ate, all natural, lots of plants, some animal products, some fruits, some root tubers, pretty simple. And the movement patterns. The movement patterns were, as you mentioned, upright. We're bipedal. We have really, before we had chairs and sofas and desks and even beds, we spent a lot of time on our feet, either walking or sprinting or jumping or climbing or crouching or squatting. And these, what we call ancestral or archetypal rest poses, were also habitual behavior of humans. So we were always not just moving a lot, but we were always changing the orientation of our body. We were moving through different ranges and planes of motion, whether we were actually walking or running, or whether we were even sitting, crouching, crawling, side saddle, cross-legged, whatever. And all of these postures, these positions, and these movement patterns are expected by our current set of genes. Our current DNA expects us to move a lot, to change positions throughout the day, even if we're not walking, and let's say we're at a standing desk. Our body still expects us to move and change positions. It does not expect us to stand still for 6 hours a day. And you might say, "Oh my gosh, I have this amazing standing desk and I'm not sitting." Well, that's not enough. You still have to change positions throughout the day, change postures throughout the day, because that is what our body expects. And what do you mean our body expects that? Well, our digestion expects us to be moving around, not lying down like a lion would after a big meal and resting, or hibernating like a bear. But our digestive process expects us to move. Our lymphatic system is based on our muscles pumping that fluid through the body. There is no heart system that pumps lymph. It requires movement to process and remove those toxins in that part of the system. Our behavior, our mood, our disposition somehow requires that we move on a regular basis, so that we find that people who sit for a long period of time become depressed and moody, and once they get up and walk around a bit, that situation becomes alleviated. So it's a real thing that our body expects us to move.
An interesting line I heard many years ago was, our ancestors used to use their bodies more than their brains, but now we use our brains more than our bodies. And I can't remember the source or where it came from, but it's actually quite a very simplistic way of thinking. Well, actually, it's so true. We're bent with our digestive system bent over, expecting to be healthy and moving. And then, yeah, and also it's just amazing, just by moving and changing your location, how your brain power and mood changes so significantly. And yet it's so underrated. It's crazy.
Yeah, and as we'll get into later, we are born naked, clearly, and barefoot, and much of our body is wired to these efferent nerves that emanate to the bottoms of the feet. So our feet, which are our contact with the ground, our contact with the universe, are so critical to the health of the body. You'll find in some of the ancient Chinese medicine or foot reflexology that there's a different part of the foot that responds to and from different parts of the body. That's that innervation coming from wherever it is in the body down to the ends of the feet. So our bodies, our genes expect us to be barefoot all the time. Well, we're not. We can't do that. But that's how we're wired. For instance, the big toe connects directly to the brain. So our ability to walk throughout the day helps us engage the brain more than sitting still or even wearing thick cushioned shoes and walking a little bit. So all these things come together, and it, this is the essence of the primal and ancestral movement to me is, when in doubt, go back to the ancestral model and see how you can emulate that in the real world today. And I think there's a lot of hacks in this world that have kind of gone above and beyond the call of duty and trying to overcome that deficiency in modern life. But for the most part, it's as simple as, eat real food, move a lot, lift heavy things once in a while, sprint once in a while, get lots of sleep, get regular sleep on a regular schedule, have community, surround yourself with your tribe. If you just adhere to those principles, you will be 90% of your way toward being that strong, lean, happy, healthy, productive human being.
I concur. I mean, when we had our call a few months back, it was actually really, really great to discuss with you about, because I call it the fundamentals of health, the eat well, sleep well, hydrate well, sun well, ground well, love well, move well, and this is really, really rang true for me, because I think biohacking, which is, I'm known as Tim Biohacker, obviously, but really my mindset is more paleo, to be quite honest. I remember thinking about a pattern. Every biohack that I could think of was linked back to mimicking nature.
Yes.
And like grounding bed sheets, mimicking grounding, red light therapy, mimicking sunset, blue sad lighting, sunrise, barefoot shoes, barefoot. It's like we're just trying to reverse technology with technology. It's fantastic.
No, it really is. It's what I call digging a hole to put the ladder in to wash the basement windows.
Yeah, I mean, it seems quite bonkers. I mean, if someone I saw selling red light therapy when I was in the desert in Abu Dhabi last week. And I was like, this is just not the place to be selling red light therapy. I mean, it's literally iced Eskimos right now.
Yes.
So a sedentary lifestyle obviously puts us at severe risk of heart disease, diabetes, dementia, and cancer, and increases the risk of death by 20 to 30%. Yet 1/3 of all people in the world didn't meet the recommendations of physical activity in 2022. It's pretty scary, isn't it?
No, it's beyond scary. And I think that's a gross underestimate of how many people didn't meet their requirements, because, you'll see, I'll also read some statistics that suggest that only 7 or 8% of the US population is metabolically fit, which means that 92 to 93% of Americans, at least, are not fit. And I have to think that would extend to the UK and most of the European Union and, the rest of the world.
Yeah, it's bonkers, absolutely bonkers. But I think, with, let's just say politics to one side for the second, with, the whole Maha movement is really gaining a lot of traction for a lot of this stuff, I think. Even if it's just a toe in the water, it's quite interesting to see how the awareness, some of these things are coming to light with RFK and everything going on.
Oh, it's needed. It's needed. And there are people who say, wait, he's a little bit swinging the pendulum a little bit back too far the other way. And I'm thinking to myself, well, first of all, we do have certain checks and balances in the US, so it's not going to get way out of hand. But his willingness to investigate and dig deep and assign people to really look into what's been going on and come up with potential solutions, that's been needed for a long time and just been bypassed by the bureaucracy that is the US government for so long. So I'm very, very excited about the possibilities for the next couple of years.
Yeah, so am I. I'm watching with popcorn for sure. So you mentioned your primal blueprint earlier. Can you explain its core tenets a little bit for me? And how would someone new to this lifestyle get started?
The core tenets are the 10 basic primal blueprint laws, and I won't go through them all, but it's move around a lot at a low level of activity. That's that movement pattern that we just discussed. And by the way, that has nothing to do with burning calories. The body doesn't really burn a lot of calories during exercise, and you can't exercise away a bad diet. Your ability to burn your stored body fat happens as a result of how you choose to eat, not so much how you move. So first of all, finding ways to move around a lot at this low level of activity. And then once in a while, lift some heavy things. Our ancestors lifted logs and boulders, and they built shelters, and they dragged carcasses, and they lugged babies, and they climbed trees, and they did all of these things that we now have to recreate in the gym, many of us. And then sprint once in a while. And our ancestors sprinted for their lives once in a while. So as part of my original set of primal blueprint laws, it was recognizing that part of the ancestral pattern was to engage in a very intense, high intensity, high effort output for brief periods of time once a week. So the term I use is sprint once in a while, but it literally encompasses a bike. You could do it on an elliptical machine. You could do it on a VersaClimber. You could do it on a rope pull machine, or a rowing machine, or swimming, whatever it is that has you going for an all-out effort, anywhere from 10 seconds to, say, 40 seconds, all out, and then resting a couple of minutes, and then repeating that a couple of times in a workout. So those three movement patterns, lots of low-level movement throughout the day. Find ways to move throughout the day. Get up from your desk, walk around, find people to go on a lunch break with and walk after lunch. Get up in the morning and walk the dog, drop the kids off, stop the car a half mile from school, and you and the kids walk the rest of the way to school. Lots of ways to find these different easy movement patterns that don't generate a lot of sweat, but they're putting your body through these motions, ranges and planes of motion.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I love the idea of, setting yourself up for success. So for instance, next to, if you have a standing desk, I have actually had a balance board. So I'd balance on and off throughout the day. I had a mini rebounder next to the desk as well. I had a pull-up bar between the lounge and the hallway before every time I would go to the toilet, and just make sure I had these things. And then, when I had my daily call at midday, I'd take a walk around the park nearby and things. So it's all really setting up. And those Atomic Habits that help me with that quite significantly, actually. And it's
absolutely.
When you look at when you look back at my calendar at all these things that I've done, it's actually quite significant how it mounts up so easily, and yet you just don't realize when it's done in small snippets.
Well, that's a good point, because many people assume that the workout is, okay, it's got to be 45 minutes straight to have any value, whether it's a run or a walk or a lifting session in the gym or whatever. In fact, I would say that 5-10-minute walks throughout the day, spread evenly throughout the day, might be more valuable than one 50-minute walk, because we want to find ways throughout the day to move. And one of the things, I have a new book we'll talk about, it's called Born to Walk, but we talk about these movement patterns and the fact that many people who are compartmentalizing their daily routine and say, okay, my workout is from here to here, and then I'm done moving. And my meals are from here to here, and then I'm done eating, and my work session is so-and-so. But the idea that you could, we call them micro workouts, and I started talking about micro workouts 10 or 15 years ago. The fact that you could, in breaks between waiting for one meeting to start and just stopping another, go do 3 sets of push-ups, or do 50 air squats, or walk around briskly the halls of your office. These are all valuable little things that you can do that count toward your movement patterns throughout the day. Again, it's critical for the person who's mindful of wait a minute, how does this fit into a eat less, move more kind of calories in, calories out pattern? It doesn't. Your body fat is determined by how you choose to eat. And we'll get into that in a little bit. So if you get rid of this notion that every bit of my movement pattern has to be associated with burning calories somehow, disabuse yourself of that notion. It doesn't. So now we just handled 3 of the 10 primal blueprint laws. But so now we talk about eat lots of plants and animals. All right. So this was the avoiding processed foods sort of thing. And when I was giving the primal blueprint laws, I was doing it in the context of a primal person. So a primal person didn't have processed foods to avoid, so they just ate lots of plants and animals, right? And they ate with the idea that they were going to be needing to fuel themselves to survive the next day or 2 days or however there was food available. So our ancestors did not eat according to this daily meal plan that said breakfast here, lunch here, dinner there. They ate when food was available, and when food wasn't available, they were able to avail themselves of their own stored body fat. And that's a skill that most modern humans have lost. And it's one of the biggest things I talk about and preach in every one of my books, is this idea of developing metabolic flexibility. So if you cut out sugars and processed foods and industrial seed oils, and you limit your eating strategy to meat, fish, fowl, eggs, nuts, seeds, vegetables, fruit, some starchy tubers, you will, of necessity, diminish the amount of carbohydrates you take in a daily basis. And by diminishing the amount of carbs you take in, you will enhance your body's willingness an ability to extract energy from your own stored body fat. You develop metabolic flexibility. Now, what does metabolic flexibility really mean? It means rather than depending on a fresh source of calories every 2 or 3 hours, because you have not developed this ability to burn stored body fat, and you depend on glucose, blood sugar, glycogen throughout the day. Instead, you've built this robust metabolic system that is able to extract energy from the body fat that you've stored on yourself, the fat on your plate of food, the carbohydrates on your plate of food, the glucose in your bloodstream, the glycogen in your muscles, or the ketones that your liver makes to feed the brain in the absence of glucose. That's metabolic flexibility. And once you develop that, then you can look at an eating strategy that says, okay, I'm eating well, I'm eating lots of plants and animals, and by lots I mean, enough to satisfy yourself. But I know, based on having fine-tuned my hunger and my palate, I know when I've had enough to eat, so I can stop eating. I don't need to finish my plate, or I don't need to even realize that I'm full, because when I'm full, it's almost too late. What I need to recognize is, when am I no longer hungry for the next bite? And with this metabolic flexibility, you develop that. With metabolic flexibility, you develop the ability to go longer periods of time without eating. And instead of being hangry or feeling starved or moody or depressed or weak, because your body is now so good at burning its own stored body fat and deriving energy from your own stored body fat, because now your brain is so good at consuming the steady supply of ketones that your liver makes, you don't feel hungry, you don't feel hangry, you don't feel the need to eat every couple of hours. And that is one of the most freeing concepts in modern life, as far as I'm concerned. Once you can untether yourself from hunger, appetite, and cravings, you are so ahead of the rest of the pack. You will then trend toward your ideal body composition. You'll have all the energy you need at any time of day. Your likelihood of getting minor colds and flu and minor sicknesses decreases, so you don't get colds and flu. And most importantly, you don't get hungry. So one of the things that happens ultimately as a result of all this, you find yourself actually consuming less food. And it's a good thing, because that is going to trend toward your own ideal body composition.
One of the things that I noticed for myself is when I was going through a stressful period and I was, a little bit more relaxed with carbs, and I don't necessarily mean, ultra processed carbs or any of that crap, but as I noticed that I would get hungry, quite often. And, when I was measuring my blood glucose, and I was quite stressed at the time, my blood glucose was always, quite a bit higher than it should be. And then, fast forward through the stressful periods, cutting out a lot of the carbs, or the more amount of carbs. And I realized I can actually fast for 2 or 3 days. My blood glucose sits at a really healthy, low level. I don't wake up in the middle of the night when I have some sort of crash of my blood sugar, because obviously your liver then mobilizes glycogen to wake you back up. It wakes you back up as your liver wakes up a bit. And I realized that, wow, I've really worked on my metabolic flexibility. And that's, I think, the next level of, as you say, freedom, because I'm not hunting for the next dinner. However, I do find, being that, let's say an ectomorph or on the skinny side, typically, I do find that if I do go too light with food, I can actually go days and days and days without eating, and then my metabolism slows down eventually because I'm not having enough energy in. So it's actually an interesting process to go through, and being quite focal on how my body and the cravings have changed, which takes me on to the question, actually, how long can you go without feeling hunger or go without eating?
Me personally?
Yeah.
I mean, I can go 36 hours without feeling like, okay, I should probably eat. To your point, and like you, I'm an ectomorph, and I work way too hard to keep my muscle mass on. I'm a vain ectomorph. So I lift to maintain a body type that I wasn't really born into. Yeah. So, for instance, I weigh 172 pounds now, and when I was a runner and one of the top elite athletes in the US in terms of marathon and triathlon, I weighed 141. So I weighed 31 pounds less than I weigh now. I couldn't keep the weight on because the running is catabolic. It literally tears muscle tissue down. So one of the things that I did years ago was I stopped running. I said, this is not serving me. if I'm not racing anymore, there's no need for me to run. There's no need for me to cannibalize my muscle tissue, to catabolize or go into catabolic mode as a result of this activity that has no real long-term life benefit for me anymore. I have decent VO2 max from walking, from sprinting once in a while. I don't need to run a lot. So when I decided to stop running and to start lifting more and doing more, ballistic, dynamic, high-intensity workouts, do more of them, but still not adding up to much less volume, right? So I almost apologize at how little I work out now to maintain my muscle mass. And as long as I pay attention to how much protein I'm getting, so my eating strategy is very protein-centric. I'm almost carnivore. I would be carnivore, but I like other foods too much to not eat them. And I like, when I'm having a meal, it's a celebration for me. I mean, I love every bite of food I put in my mouth. I want every bite that I eat to be enjoyable. I don't want to eat something that's good for me just because somebody says it's good for me if I don't like the taste of it. No, I want to enjoy every bite of food that I put in my mouth. Having said that, I know exactly when to stop. Sometimes I don't stop, even though I know exactly when to stop, but I know exactly when to stop based on this intuitive skill that I've developed over the years, and which is one of my dreams for all of the people that follow me and what I do. I want you to have that skill. I want you to be intuitively able to say, it feels like I should eat now, I'll eat now. It feels like I should stop now, I'll stop now. 2 bites of dessert does great. 16 bites of dessert, probably not going to serve me that well. So back to the ectomorph concept of how long can I go without eating? I can go long periods of time without eating. I choose not to. So my personal regular eating schedule is I have my first meal about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and it's protein-centric. It's a piece of, slab of meat, some salmon, some fish, whatever, with some form of vegetables. I might have a snack of fruit, berries, typically in the mid-afternoon, although most afternoons I'm too distracted to even want to eat or feel the need to eat. So lunch, call it lunch, and then a protein-centric dinner, and a glass or two of wine, red wine, and I am the happiest camper ever. And I get my 16 to 17 hours of not eating, which, as you know, and most people in the biohacking space know, that's really when the body goes and does its magic, the times that you're not eating. And whether or not you get a autophagy effect from that shorter period of time of not eating, there is a lot of benefit to letting the digestive system just rest for those periods of time. Again, as an ancestral pattern, our ancestors did not eat all day long. We have some people have this picture of our ancestors, just wandering through the bushes and eating berries and roots and shoots and tubers and like grazing all day. We're not grazers. We ate when food was available, and then there were days or weeks sometimes when their food was not available. And our digestive processes, the orchestration of our digestive tracts, our tooth system, it all sort of evolved to accommodate this omnivorous diet that was based around what I would call fractal eating, once in a while, not on a regular basis. And so to the extent that I can replicate that in my daily life by skipping breakfast, because when I wake up in the morning, I'm not hungry, and I have all the energy I need to get the day started. I have a cup of coffee, that's fine, whatever. But I work out in the morning, fasted just before this podcast. I did a heavy leg day. It was great. I won't eat again for another hour or two or whatever. I have a meeting after this podcast, so I won't eat until probably 2 o'clock today. Great. It's wonderful. I mean, I've learned that works for me, and maybe it doesn't work for some people, but for me, and then I won't do a 7-day fast because I work too hard, to put my muscle on.
And for any of you guys that haven't seen Mark, I dare you to just Google Mark Sisson, and you'll see how well he looks after himself. It's actually quite fantastic. So I feel like you're in exactly the place where I'd like to be. I mean, I resonate with the whole, protein-centric diet because, obviously it satiates us much better. I think too many people don't have enough protein and therefore they're never full, and then they're full when it's too late. And I think this is a classic thing about processed food. One thing I heard a few months ago was, I think it was Max Lugavere, And someone said to him, how do you define processed foods? And he said, something you can't cook or make in the kitchen yourself. And I love that, because it's like, how far do you go until it's processed? Because let's be honest, a banana is processed these days just because of the process from tree to home. But what is a processed food? It's something you can't prepare in your own kitchen. And I think if we're to discuss this in terms of the paleo, how would you describe the paleo diet specifically?
The paleo diet, the primal blueprint diet for me was always one based around not so much excluding foods just because of the possibility that somebody might be reactionary to them, but looking at including as many foods possible to give each person as bountiful a palate and options as possible. So the original paleo diet, for instance, said no milk. And I like, from day one, I'm like, I don't know why you would say no milk. I mean, dairy has been around for at least 10,000 years of animal husbandry in humanity, but I'm sure that every animal that ever killed and ate a female animal didn't throw the milk part away and didn't throw the mammary glands away. So why would we exclude milk? There was a time when things like chocolate, there some amount of alcohol, and I'm like looking at this original paleo diet going, wait, don't tell me what I can eat. Tell me what I can eat. So we started to look at cheese. I mean, cheese is processed, right? It's processed milk, but I think it's beneficial. Yogurt is processed milk. Everything exists on a spectrum, Tim, and it's not necessarily that something that a food group is horrible or wonderful. It's a lot of gray areas here. With regard to fruits, there are some fruits that are tart and wonderful and have, anthocyanins and berries, for instance, and others that are just really high in sugar. And to think that they all lump into all fruits are bad or all fruits are good is kind of the wrong way of looking at that. So with regard to the paleo primal diet, for me, it was basically just get rid of sugars, processed sugars, added sugars. So if you get rid of pies, cakes, candies, cookies, sweetened beverages, sweetened teas, if you get rid of the industrial seed oils, those processed foods that contain those oils plus refined flours, if you get rid of refined flours, and you just come down to this list that I enumerated earlier, now you have the basis of ingredients for almost an infinite number of ways of cooking food. And what makes the difference are the methods of preparation now. It's the herbs, the spices, the sauces, the dressings, the toppings, and things like that. So people who are new to a paleo experience would look at that list and go, geez, I can't eat anything. It's like, what am I supposed to eat here? And the answer would be, well, wow, I already have 10 cookbooks on different ways to prepare these foods and make them more than palatable, make them so delicious that your non-paleo friends will come over to your house and go, my God, this is the greatest casserole I ever had, or the greatest dish of whatever it is I've ever had. How do you do this? So it's not difficult. You just have to be mindful of how you do this.
Yeah, it's a really, really great point, actually, because when I started my health journey, before I knew anything about paleo or biohacking or any of this stuff, and I was told to go on the anti-candida diet at the time, the famous diet. And I remember going into a restaurant or like a lunch place to grab some food. And I looked at everything and I was like, I can't eat a single thing here except for maybe the asparagus and green beans. I'm like, I can't have the pasta, I can't have the lasagna, I can't have this, I can't have that. So I walked into the supermarket, 3 stores down. I'm just looking around, I'm like, I can't eat anything. I can't eat anything. Now it's just quite funny because, fast forward 12 years, and I walk into a supermarket and I just think this is all just manufactured products. And I'm like, what is there actually that's food? And I went from the definition of food completely changing, like what is proper fuel? And now when I walk into a supermarket, I look, for the farm salmon, non-farm salmon or, berries and things. And it's actually 99% of the store doesn't exist. And it's not overwhelming of what I can't eat anymore. It is, like you say, what can I eat as a result? So it's actually really interesting to hear that come from you directly, because I really feel like that's the process I've gone through over the last X years. And I think, for anyone listening to this thinking, well, that doesn't leave me much to eat. but it does. It's just your mindset that's only focused on the things that you're used to focusing on when you go in the supermarket. And the crazy thing is I've actually compared like for like my old shopping basket with my new shopping basket, and it's actually cheaper to eat paleo natural foods than buying all these products with barcodes. It's actually quite crazy. And yet they say you've got to be rich to be healthy.
Yeah, no,
No.
I hate that. Yeah, because exactly right. I mean, one of the things that happens as a result of you achieving metabolic flexibility is you find that you thrive on probably 30% fewer calories than you needed when you ate a processed diet. And there's a biochemical reason for all of this, because a lot of that processed food, your body's having a difficult time digesting it, absorbing it. And so sometimes you pass it through undigested, or you create some thermic effect of the food that causes your body temperature to go up, or the inflammation as a result of the types of food that you're consuming is causing your body heat to rise, that thermic effect. And so, and at the end of the day, if you're consuming more calories than you're burning off, then you store those calories and you gain weight over time. And so again, creating this ideal concept of metabolic flexibility, then you go, okay, if I'm protein centric, if I start my diet with how much protein do I need? And I need say you need 120 grams a day, which I don't think anybody needs more than 120 grams of protein a day. That's 480 calories. Okay, done. And then I can eat all the vegetables I want, almost with impunity. So whether it's your Brussels sprouts, your broccoli, asparagus, beans, salads, if they're undressed and not buttered, 200 calories max of all of that stuff. It's almost impossible, if they'll put dressings and toppings on them. And then the rest is sort of the starchy carbs or the fats. Well, the fats come with the protein. And so you might add an oil to the salad dressing, and that's a good fat, or you might add butter to whatever it is you're cooking, that's a good fat. But you wind up going, my God, if I start with protein and I add in all the vegetables I want to eat, and then I sort of fill out the rest with some healthy fats and a little bit of starchy tubers, I'm barely at 2,000 calories a day. And I used to eat 3,000 calories a day when I was eating 3 meals a day and eating dessert and eating bread rolls before the meal came at a restaurant and all that stuff. And you realize, my gosh, I really was overeating. And the fact that I could get away with it without gaining weight doesn't mean it was good for me. It just meant that something was going on in my body that was having to deal with these extra calories that I did not need. Now, again, developing metabolic flexibility is paramount, and it only works if you realize that hunger is not driving you. So you get all the protein you need, you have all the muscle mass, all the strength, all the energy, you don't get sick, and most importantly, you don't get hungry. And then with all those criteria fulfilled, you go, oh my God, I'm eating 30% fewer calories, and it's costing me less than when I was buying all of this crap.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. And the people that are saying, nah, don't believe it, just try it. Try it. Like, see how you do. I mean, it's going to take you a few bumpy weeks of adjustment period, but it really does work. I just want to round back to something that you mentioned about a couple of glasses of red wine. How does, obviously this is something you enjoy and it makes you, enjoy life that little bit more. Where do you sit on this? And I'm wondering, is it Dry Farm wines that you drink?
Well, it's totally, yes, it absolutely is Dry Farm wines that I drink. There's a lot going around the internet these days about any amount of ethanol is bad for you, right? It's really interesting to see how the conventional wisdom shifts based on a couple of new gurus in the space. And then how the traditional media will, glom onto some concept like that. And because it's not just newsworthy, but it's provoking, they'll write all of these things. So recently I read that any amount of alcohol is bad. Look, I'm of the opinion that, first of all, the body makes a little bit of ethanol, and ethanol is the form of alcohol that's in the alcoholic beverages that we drink. The body makes a little bit of ethanol. Ethanol is a fuel. It has 7 calories per gram of ethanol is what's ascribed as a fuel. The body burns off ethanol preferentially the way it burns glucose preferentially when you overconsume glucose and you have a robust metabolism. The body tends to look at glucose and say, wait, excess glucose is a bad thing. Excess glucose over time, you just talked about, your blood sugar when you were going through your stress levels there and your fasting blood glucose was higher than you wanted it to be. Why is that a concern with you? Well, because over time, that can lead to a high HbA1c, which is in sort of the first indicator of type 2 diabetes and a whole cascade of problems that occur. So while 5 grams of glucose in the bloodstream is sort of a nice, healthy level, 8 grams or 9 grams is too much. And over time, it's bad for you. So I looked at ethanol almost the same way. And I said, the body knows how to burn ethanol. If you can consume it in the right quantities, at the right pace, under the right circumstances, then why should it be considered this negative thing that any amount of it is bad for you? So now let's create the context. My context is I only drink low sugar, zero sugar, low alcohol, additive-free red wines, and they have low tannin. So these are grapes that have not been overly macerated. So we talk about grapes, and like Americans want really deep red, rich red wines, in their Cabernets and their Syrahs. And how you get that is by overly macerating the grape. Well, the tannins are in the skin of the grape. So if you don't overly macerate it and you reduce the amount of tannins, the histamines, the things that cause sort of part of the bad reaction over time to drinking wine, for instance, you get rid of those. Now, I drink the wine with meals. I don't just drink red wine for the sake of drinking red wine. I drink red wine with a meal. I'm of the opinion that if I don't drink water with a meal because I don't want to dilute the digestive process, and wine has a pH that's a little bit closer to the pH of the stomach. I'm eating red meat that has been cooked, and it may have heterocyclic amines, which is one of the concerns, the sort of cancer concerns that people have about red meat. But if I'm eating it in context with in a bioreactor that is my stomach, and I'm drinking red wine and eating red meat, my thought process is I'm sort of negating the problems that may arise from this. So in the context of a meal, enjoying a meal, and the sensation and the beauty of having a nice glass of red wine with a nice steak, and then tell me, don't do that because you might not live 4 months longer from the age of 97 to the age of 98, right? One of the things that I see happening so often in this space is people are looking at their numbers and going, or their risk factors, which is even crazier, and saying, okay, if I do this behavior, even though it's going to cost me some immediate hedonic pleasure, some hedonistic pleasure, some gustatory pleasure, even though it's going to cost me the enjoyment of my life in real time, it might add 2 minutes to my life in 40 years. I don't think that way. So I want to, this is one of the things I'm going to want to talk about at the Health Optimization Summit is like, let's live our lives in real time. If we get too caught up in the numbers of reducing risk factors and possibly extending our lives at the far end, years out, and meanwhile we're not as content, we're not as fulfilled right now because we're putting off all of these potentially, life's small pleasures. How is that, in my mind, how is that a benefit?
Well, I've said this before in the podcast, but I'm going to say it again because it's one of my most defining things I've heard since I've been in the biohacking space. It was guy goes to the doctor, that was the failure initially anyway, but guy goes to the doctor and says, "Doctor, I want to live forever." And the doctor says, "Do you drink?" "Nope." "Do you smoke?" "Nope." "Do you eat fatty foods?" "Nope." "Do you go skydiving?" "Nope." He goes, "Well, why do you want to live forever?" So there is an element of, like, for instance, someone asked me on a podcast a few months ago, it's like, how old do you want to live? Do you want to live to 180, like, Mr. Asprey?
Dave.
And I was like, no, I don't need that. I don't need that. I'm happy to clear the way out for the next generation. My ego does not need to be 180. I'm happy if I beat my family average and I've enjoyed every minute of it along the way. This is my goal, to live vibrantly and not, but at the same time, having the long-term view in mind, but never lose short of the long-term view, but still enjoying the moment. And I think it's something in this space that people tend to forget. And when we look at Brian Johnson, who's become so addicted to the ultimate health, he's not, in my opinion, no disrespect to him, he's not living. So it's great to hear you say that. It's really great to hear you say that, actually.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I agree 100%, and I've said this as well. One of my big concerns for anybody, but particularly with new generations, is why do you even get out of bed in the morning? Like, what is your reason for getting out of bed? Do you have a purpose? Do you have a reason for being here? And at some point, being human involves, this sort of meat puppet that we are, which is just the bizarre permutation of billions of years of evolution, two strands of RNA in the primordial ooze with a propensity to want to replicate. So we are really effectively only here to pass the genes along to the next generation. And to the extent that we can extract contentment, pleasure, and joy and fulfillment out of every moment that we possibly can, once you've had kids, and by the way, once your kids have had kids, once you've had grandchildren, that really completes the cycle. A lot of people say, well, I'm here, I want to have kids, and that's my, as a human, that's my job to have children. And it really is. That's your ultimate, sort of, and if you choose not to, God bless you, and great, that's wonderful, that's your choice. But in my, if we look at biology, the species only continues if we propagate, if we pass the genes along to the next generation. And in my case, that cycle was only complete for me when my kids started having kids. And then I'm like, oh, that's the circle of life. That's really the circle of life, to know that your kids were able to pass the genes on. And in the process, everybody's enjoying every single day and laughing and having fun together and playing and enjoying great meals together and drinking great wines together and not building this life around don't die. I mean, really, that is such, again, I've had conversations with Brian. I want to get together with him. I want to take him out on the fat bike on the beach here in Miami. But don't die. Seriously, that's your moniker? That is totally a tech answer to what I call a wet problem. Again, he's doing some amazing, groundbreaking therapies. It's only going to take one bad move for him to go off the rails. But it's I think entertaining to watch what he does. But that is not how I want to live my life, and I do not want to live. God forbid I live forever. It is the finality of life that gives today meaning. I mean, that's really man's sense of his own mortality is what makes every moment special, and what makes it so critical and important that you as a human being recognize that now is all you have. Yesterday happened and it's gone and it's past, and you can regret it or you can rejoice about it, but right now is all you have, and tomorrow doesn't even exist and will never exist. So within reason, find those things that give you joy and contentment. And, so have some dessert once in a while, take a day off training once in a while, do something relatively risky once in a while, just to sort of, prove that you're, that this life is worth living, and enjoy every moment.
Yeah, I hear you completely. The do not die, before we move on to the next question, because I got a really good one coming up, is do not die. If we're always saying do not die, do not die, do not die, we're in a war zone. We're literally, our nervous system will never calm, and that's an anti-longevity hack in itself. So it's like, if you don't, once my mentor Trevor Sylvester, who was actually on the podcast once, cognitive hypnotherapy guy, he taught me, try not to think of a blue tree.
Yeah.
Don't think of a blue tree. It's like the negation. You have to think of the blue tree to not think of the blue tree. And it's like the same as do not die. You have to think about dying to think about do not dying, because we can't process the negation. So it's like, how about live forever, or live vibrantly, or be happy every day, or whatever it may be. I think it must be a very interesting place to be mentally. And
my first Primal Blueprint T-shirt was "Live long, drop dead." So I'm sticking by that.
That's a solid. That's a solid strategy. Yeah. Hey guys, if you haven't heard, the Paleo Revival is here. This April in Austin, Texas, the tribe is getting back together again at the Health Optimization Summit. Learn how 35 industry legends like Gary Brecker, Mark Sisson, Ben Greenfield, JJ Virgin, and more optimize their health, and how you can too. Spend the weekend surrounded by ancestral wisdom, exploring cutting-edge health tech, and connecting with a tribe that makes you feel, like family. Austin, this is long overdue, but the wait is finally over. Get your ticket today at hosummit.com/Austin. So another way of getting back to nature, and you touched on it earlier briefly, do barefoot shoes do the trick, or should we actually be barefoot? And what about using less tech gadgets and things like that?
I'm a manufacturer of barefoot shoes. I make a five-toed shoe that is taking off around the world, but largely right now in the United States. It is mimicking a barefoot experience, and I tell everybody, I would rather you go barefoot whenever it's possible or feasible. Being outside barefoot in the grass, in the sand, in the dirt, in nature, there is something so primal, so uniquely special about that. I talk in context of people who you go outside and you take your shoes off and now you're barefoot in the grass. You can't not have a smile on your face. Being barefoot in the grass just makes you smile. People talk about earthing or grounding, this accessing these negative ions. It's a real thing. Your body, again, early on, we talked about what are the genetic expectations of being human? What does our DNA expect of us? What does our genetic recipe expect of us? It expects us to be barefoot and grounded as often as possible. I have a friend, he's my age, he goes out in the ocean every day, and he is barefoot, and he's standing up to about his chest in water for 40 minutes. That is his grounding experience. And he said it's incredible because it's not just the earth, it's the water as well. It's the sun. It's an amazing part of his daily protocol, as important as working out, as important as yoga or walking or anything else would be to him or to me. That's his grounding experience every day. Ways in which we can get out in nature. Now, if you live in the city, it's tough. So if you get into, if you go to some of the parks in London or you go to a park in Manhattan, that's an opportunity to get among trees and to get that sort of experience, that greenery, that lushness away from the concrete and pavement and all of the other artificial surfaces that we find ourselves surrounded with. But to the extent that you can get out on a daily basis outside and just breathe fresh air, number one, and then to the extent that you can get out and walk with either bare feet or minimalist footwear on uneven surfaces, that it really, it's like a massage for your feet. So with my shoe company, with Peluva, we tell people, go look for cobblestones. Cobblestones are what we call foot candy. It's amazing the sensation you get from walking on cobblestone. Every time your foot lands, instead of this thick, cushioned, raised heel that you would find in most modern running shoes, now you're very close to the ground. You feel the tilt, the texture, even the temperature of whatever it is underneath you. Your foot responds accordingly. All of that information that's on the bottom of your feet tells the brain exactly how to scrunch the arch, how much to articulate the toes, how to roll the ankle out or in a little bit to accommodate that tilt, and then take the pressure off the knee, how deeply to bend the knee to absorb the shock, whether you're walking or jogging or sprinting or dancing or whatever. All of this haptic input is necessary for an ideal movement pattern. The brain has to organize the kinetic chain. The kinetic chain describes all of the tendons and ligaments, the joints that are engaged in movement. And the brain needs the information on how to organize it, because in nature and originally ancestrally, every step you took, your foot landed in a different orientation for the most part. Unless you're walking across the plains, you're stepping on rocks and avoiding sharp things, or stepping on sharp things, but rolling your foot to one side to not get a puncture. Our feet expect this, our brains expect this, and we don't feed it. We don't nourish our feet or our brains the way we should because of the footwear that we're choosing now. So that's my latest sort of foray into changing the way the world moves through footwear.
I love that. I mean, I know Clint Ober and his work very well, and looked into grounding quite considerably. I'm sharing about grounding every day, all the way through, the lockdown and times where I was on a beach, pretty much swimming every day, getting my free electrons and photons from the sun and hydration from the sea and everything, which is fantastic. So I love that you touched on that. And in fact, in the city, one of my technology hacks to reverse technology of grounding is actually I have a Samina bed, or Samina sleep system as they call it, which has earthing built into it and a dirty electricity filter, so you're not causing issues. So I love that you've touched on that element of it, and it is so fundamentally important to our whole electrical system. In fact, I did dark field red blood cell analysis straight after a flight into Vegas, and my red blood cells were all clumped together. And then I went outside and grounded on the what patch of grass I could find, and went back in and had it remeasured, and the red blood cells were equidistant and lovely again. And it's just showing how the electrical charge, was replenished by grounding. So I'm really happy that you mentioned that. And then on the barefoot shoes, it's actually fantastic. I think when you know, it's one of those things that most people don't even realize. And there's a few brands out there that do it. You don't even necessarily notice that people are wearing barefoot shoes. But I found, I've heard from several guys that have had posture problems or prostate issues even, or hip issues, that by going to a barefoot shoe and being more connected with the ground helps rewire their nervous system somehow, and these issues magically disappear. Is this something that you've heard about from?
Oh, we hear it all the time. It's incredible. I mean, I've been a fan of barefoot, the minimalist footwear movement, since 2007. I was one of the original adopters of the original 5-toed shoe. I had 25 pair in my closet, different colors. I mean, I wore them all the time. That's all I wore exclusively. So I've been someone who's benefited from this idea that our feet are critical to our health, that foot health is the new sleep. Foot health is our connection with the earth. It's our connection with ground. Everything we do depends on how strong our feet are. As we get older, if we're talking about reducing risk for mortality, trip and fall is one of the biggest issues for older people, right? You trip and fall, break a hip. Some of that has to do with lack of mobility, lack of balance, lack of foot strength, lack of overall leg strength. It all starts with the feet. Like balance starts with the feet. And if you are unable to improve your balance over time, the likelihood of you tripping and falling gets worse. Foot strength. If you do trip, if you can catch yourself from falling, if you can put one foot forward and bend the knee a little bit and catch, all of these things are risk factors for decreasing your longevity. Don't die. And if we're gonna invoke that motto again, but even more importantly, just being able to walk outside. I walk a lot. I walk anywhere from 6 to 10 miles a day, mostly on pavement, because I live in Miami Beach. I walk on sand as much as I can, but I wind up just putting the miles in on pavement. So I created a shoe that I could walk barefoot, with a barefoot feeling, with wide toe splay, plant the heel, roll off the big toe, plant the heel, roll off the big toe. Regular running shoes don't allow that. And so the more you walk with running shoes on, sometimes the worse it is for your posture and your gait. And so people say, well, Mark, I walk a lot of miles. I walk 5, 6, 8 miles a day, but my lower back hurts, or my hips are hurting, or my knees are feeling it every time I walk. And I'm like, well, that's because you're not getting that ground feel, that sensation that your brain needs to orchestrate your kinetic chain perfectly, so that every step you take, it's a perfect orchestration of your own unique kinetic chain. Whether you have no arches, flat feet, pigeon-toed, knock-kneed, however you describe yourself as, oh my God, I'm at the mercy of my family's genes and I'm screwed. No, you were born with a perfect kinetic chain, as long as you give your own brain, the information it needs on how to organize your perfect kinetic chain in a way that best suits you. And you can only do that either barefoot or with minimalist footwear that allows that tactile expression, that haptic input, that sensory input.
Thank you for explaining. So just coming on to our last couple of questions now, like you mentioned earlier on about your tribe. Now, one of the things when I met actually Gary Brecker, and he was a mortality statistician, and one of the things that struck me about what he was talking about and his angle within biohacking was that there was one bit of data that was the biggest predictor of a life length cut by 50% was loneliness. It's crazy. Like literally more than anything else, they knew if someone was lonely, then that their early death would be predicted by 50% shorter than someone that didn't. And loneliness and isolation is a big cause also of dementia. Now, obviously you mentioned the tribe and how important it is. So what do you think the role of having a tribe in the paleo movement is?
Same thing. I mean, if you go back to ancestral patterns, we evolved in small groups of 12, maximum size 125 or 150. So the tribe would be those people who would essentially help you move over the weekend for a case of beer. People who would give up something of value of themselves to make sure that you were comfortable and happy and healthy. So those are your people. And in most cases, it's your, it's your family, your immediate family, and your 5 best friends. That's a tribe. And then there's this thing we used to call the Dunbar number. It's still a real thing. Up to 120, 150 people who who are you can have great times with, who you can connect with, who you can catch up with on a regular basis. Once you get past that number of 120 or 150, it becomes unmanageable and in many cases stressful. And one of the issues with modern tech and with the devices now is we have, 8,000 friends on Facebook, and we have all these people we're trying to connect to, and all of these people we're trying to impress. You go back to the tribe, and what is it about humans? We're social beings. It is part of anthropology. It's part of primate behavior that we are social beings. We need each other, whether it's teaching each other, whether it's grooming each other in small settings, whether it's feeding each other. We need this contact. It's built into our DNA, and without it, there's a level of stress that you may not feel necessarily, but ultimately creates depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation. I mean, it becomes a real thing. And if you've heard Scott Galloway talk about it, we're creating a nation in the U.S. and I think the UK too of young men who are not connected with anybody. They're living alone. They're playing video games all day. They're addicted to porn. They don't have a reason to get out of bed in the morning, and they don't have a social circle. So one of the ways to really initially fix that is somehow to enforce the fact that it is your tribe that is one of the most important aspects of your well-being and your demeanor. Surround yourself with people that you trust, that you love, that love you, that trust you, and that has maybe a greater don't die benefit than maybe any of the other hacks that you might take on.
And it's actually interesting. I heard a quote by Tim Ferriss about 15 years ago, and I noted it down, and I read it every single month in my reminders. And it's, if 80% of your problems come from 20% of the people, you know what to do. And it's like, there's so many incredible people. And I think being aligned on a mission, and I would say we're on a similar one, same as Gary and I, same as Ben and I. There's so many amazing people out there. Why wouldn't you focus on the ones that are in alignment with you, that can help lift you up? Like, for instance, having you as as a role model, I guess, and seeing what you talk about makes me want to be better, which then helps me maybe with my mentee learn to be better. And it kind of all spreads out, and then we're all like-minded and we all look after each other. And I think this is why, originally when I reached out to you and said that, I'm doing the Paleo Revival with the Health Optimization Summit in Austin, would you be open to speaking? Because, as I said at the start of this podcast, and I'm not trying to blow smoke, but you are the father of the paleo movement, and it's like the tribe by definition. So I'm really, really excited to have you there. So thank you for explaining it as such, because it really does resonate deeply with me. And what I'm trying to do is connect everyone so that we can all be healthier and have awareness around it and have fun and get our tribe back together. So I'm going to do a cheeky plug right here of Health Optimization Summit, Austin, Texas, 12th and 13th of April, 2025. It's going to be some amazing speakers, including Mark. So if you haven't checked it out already, it's hosummit.com/USA. Cheeky plug. So finally, if someone were to go on a primal vacation and practice the tenets of primal living, what would that look like, Mark?
Well, it depends on your definition, what your budget is. I'm going to the Maldives in a month, and I will be eating natural foods. I will be stand-up paddling every day. I will be in the water grounding every day. I will be with a tribe of 8 people, very close to me. I will be, enjoying robust amounts of sun and sleeping well. I don't know how I could get much more primal or paleo than that.
Have you got room in your bag? That's amazing. Mark, it's been so fun to chat with you today and to hear some of the insights that you've got. So thank you very much for coming on. I'm really looking forward to seeing you in Austin in, not many weeks' time now.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Thanks for having me, Tim. It was great talking with you today.
Yeah, thanks, man. You've been listening to the Health Optimization Podcast, and I'm Tim Gray. If you've enjoyed this episode, give it a thumbs up, leave a comment, and subscribe for more. And don't miss the chance to join me and 35 speakers this April in Austin, Texas for the Health Optimization Summit. Tickets are available from hosummit.com/Austin. I cannot wait to get the Paleo Tribe back together again. See you next time, and remember, let's spread the health.